What's up everyone? Back here with another video, this one by request from one of my subscribers. This is going to be a quick overview of how to set up the Neptune Apex controller though. So you just plug that in to, here's the brain. Here's the main brain of the entire system here. Here, main brain, I guess you would say. The first aqua bus that's all the way to the left is going to the actual EB8, the power strip. The one to the right of that is the Ethernet cord. Just plug it right in from your wall. The next one is then the auto top off. It's the Breakout box. I believe it's called I/O, that's where that goes in. And then you got the pH probe and the ORP probe. Both of those are doing really well. The sensors are working fairly well. I know the pH is because I test it with a test kit every now and then just to make sure it's on, and it is. Oh, I missed actually, between the Ethernet and the Breakout box is the temperature probe. So that's how you plug in all of this. Now, down here, here's the EB8. You can't really see it, what I'm going to try to tell you about, but if you look at the bottom left-hand corner right here, you can see two USB aqua bus cables. One is coming in from the WXM, the other is going out to the brain. So you only have one coming from the brain to the EB8, and one coming from the EB8 to the WXM, and that's where the head unit is plugged into the WXM. So they are all linked together, they all have to be linked together, and they are in that manner. So again, it goes from the brain to the EB8, EB8 to WXM, WXM to head unit. Now, each of these is fully programmable. So it doesn't matter where you plug each in unless you know something's going to draw an extreme amount of power, and then there are specific slots that you do want to put them in, but for me nothing is crazy like that, so I just left it, put them wherever I wanted them. I actually put the left side is always on, the right side can be on or off. It's the only way I did it. Just so that on my iPhone, everything at the top is on, everything at the bottom is off. It's just so I can look quickly and make sure everything is in the right state. Here is the Breakout box. Now this is fairly straightforward. You take any float switch with a power and a ground, and you connect the ground to the terminal that's all the way to the left, and then each power gets its own. Alright everyone, so we're back here. Here is the main dashboard here of the Apex. So as you can see, this is where you can check on pretty much everything. Whatever you want listed here will be listed here. I have everything listed here just because that's what I wanted to have listed here. Both MP40s are here as well. So let's start. I'll show you, we'll go from left to right here, showing you how I set everything up. Bag 9 and 18 I set up the same way. It's quite simple actually. I'll zoom in here. Alright, so the Mag 9 I have set, again, simply to fall back on, set on. So if the Apex for any reason were to crash, it would automatically just turn that outlet on. It would keep the Mag 9 on. That's what I want, because if my Apex happens to crash for any reason whatsoever and I'm not home, I don't want my entire tank just shut off. I'd want it to still be running. So that's why I left that one on. Now, here are the LEDs for underneath the tank, for the sump. It's just set to fall back off. And the reason it's set to fall back off is because I always want them off. The only way I want them to be on is if I click on. So let's see if you can see this here. Okay, so if you can see this, LEDs are right here. So on auto, they're off. And if I want them on, you just click on and they'll pop on. So if they're on auto, they'll be off. So I did that so that everything on my screen is on auto all at once. And then the light tells you whether it's on or off. The orange is the MP40s. Green means it's on, and the gray means it's off. So that's why I have the, that's why I have the LEDs set to fallback off, because I just always want them off unless I turn them on. Now the next one here is my water change, which is fallback off until I program it on. I don't want it done automatically when I'm not at the house. I want to be here watching to make sure nothing ever happens. So it's off until I program it on, just like the LEDs. Now here's where you start to get a little technical. Not too bad, but a little bit. Zoom in a little bit more here. Alright, that's better. So it's fallback on. I always want it on, like I said with the mags. Just in case the Apex crashes, I want my skimmer on. I don't want to not have a skimmer for X amount of days. Now, the switches. Switch 2 is actually the bottom switch. Sorry, the top switch. That's the high float switch. So if it's closed, then the skimmer is on. In other words, if it's not floating, then the skimmer will be on. If switch 2 is open, which means floating, then the skimmer will be off. The reason that is there is because when the water gets too high in the sump, so say the Mag 9 and 18 are shut off, the water level will raise into the sump until the high float switch. When it hits the high float switch, there will be so much water in the sump that the skimmer will start overflowing, because it'll be sitting in a good 6 more inches of water. So it'll be sitting in almost 12 to 14 inches of water, so it starts overflowing like crazy. So as soon as that second float switch actually floats, it shuts the skimmer off. Now, defer 1 minute then on is because when the high float switch is triggered, when you turn the Mag 9 and 18 back on, it doesn't drop the water back down right to where it should be. It takes about 40 seconds, 45 seconds. So I programmed it to not even come back on for a minute after the top float switch closes again, just so that I know that the skimmer won't overflow for any reason whatsoever. Now the chiller. Now this I don't have actually running off the Apex, the chiller. I don't have my heaters or chiller running off the Apex. It's controlled by the chiller itself. So the chiller has a temperature gauge in it, temperature probe in it. It knows whether it needs to be heated or chilled. So the chiller actually controls my temperature of the tank. So I just have this again to fall back on, set on, just so that it is always on constantly, because the chiller controls the temperature itself, so I don't need the Apex to do anything for me. Now the auto top off. Now this I want fallback off. That just means that if anything were to happen to the Apex, it would shut this switch off. Now obviously I want that because I don't want it pumping fresh water into my sump if my power would go out or if our Apex dies for any reason. So I just want it off if anything were to happen. I'll top off myself if I have to. Now if switch 1, that's the auto top off switch, it's the low switch. That's where I always want my water to be. If it's closed, then on. So if it's not floating, if it hits the bottom of the switch, then the auto top off kicks on. If it's floating, then it shuts it off. So what'll happen is when it closes, it'll kick it on until it starts to float, and then it'll shut it off. Now the 10-second defer on and off is because what you want here is if you stick your hand in the sump for any reason to work in there and you're splashing around, the water will create a little wave, which will make the float switch go up and down, and you don't want the auto top off to kick on, off, so you put a 10-second delay in there. So when it hits down, it takes 10 seconds for it to kick the auto top off on. And if it's going up and down, it won't actually ever kick it on and off unless it's up or down for 10 seconds. So that's just another little safety feature in there. Now I'll show you the right MP40, which is the master. Now don't get confused here, it's really not that big of a deal. It's not that crazy. I'll explain why. With the WXM, you can control the MP40s to change its program every minute of every day. It's a little ridiculous. I haven't seen anybody that does that. I don't think you want to do that because you can't even get the water flowing through your tank in a minute. But here's what I did. Fallback tidal. So again, if anything happens to the apex, it goes into tidal mode. It's set to on. Now this is the time that I ran. If it's 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., it's on short pulse mode. So that's what creates the little wave in your tank. It makes your corals go back and forth. I just love that look. I think it's awesome. Now 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. is lagoon. Now the reason that there's a 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. lagoon is I'll show you with the left MP40 why there's two lagoons back to back. Now 11 to 2 is short pulse mode again, and then by the way, it's not 11 to 2, it's 11 to 14, so they go by military time. You have to put it in there as that. Otherwise, it thinks that 2 is 2 a.m. So I'll read it like it's military time. 11 to 14 is short pulse, 14 to 15 tidal, 15 to 18 is nutrient export mode, 18 to 20 is tidal mode again, and then you're going long pulse mode, which I have set so that each MP40 goes for 30 seconds at 70% power. And then you got from 22 to 22:30, so for 30 minutes there I have what I call clean. It's both MP40s going at 100% for 30 minutes just to get any detritus that's at the bottom of the tank or anything that's in the tank that you want it picked up so that it can be taken out. I put that clean mode in there. And then from 22:30 to 7 a.m. you got nutrient export mode. And then my feed is both MP40s will go on 10% power for 5 minutes when I program my feed mode. So now let me show you the left MP40. So the reason why I had the little bit of time, the two lagoons, is because for the first for the first one, this is constantly set to anti-sync mode. So unless it's one of these where I have it set to sync, it will constantly be the opposite of whatever the right one is. Now, from 10 to 11, it's synced with the right MP40, and from 11 to 12, it's synced with the right MP40. Now, honestly, in fairness, now that I'm looking at this, I could have just made this 11 to 12 and only had one line, but that's alright. Doesn't make it any different that there's two lines in there. So it's constantly anti-sync unless it's from a 10 to a 12, then it's in sync mode. Now, going back to the right MP40, in order to create these here, lagoon, short pulse, tidal, you have to make them. So what you have to do, I'll show you here. Let's go back here. Let's try to get the camera focused. What you have to do is you have to go to configuration and profile set.